Hey everybody, this is AI with Dr. Craig, and I'm delighted to have Erik with us right now, coming to us from the United States of America, who's an enterprise account executive with Spark Cognition. Hey Erik.
Hey, how's it going? Glad to join you
Really
today.
good. Excited to hear about your backstory, the origin story of Erik, and how you came to be interested in AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for my end, it really came up and was a mechanical engineer and had really jumped into the technology side, and then really jumped in my career was with Rockwell Automation and a couple other companies that were heavy in industrial automation across manufacturing, and that really ranged from helping people make crayons to beer and cement. And then that jumped in and started kind of going up the kind of technological development side into biotechnology up in Boston. And then now the company I work for, all I focus on is AI, but not in kind of the consumer applications, but in more heavy industry. So starting to look at how people can predict machinery failures, optimize throughput inside of facilities, and then also start looking at like workforce gaps. So using things like generative AI and large language models to be able to coach younger people to be able to maintain facilities as well.
Can we talk about that workforce development and how you might spot gaps and learning opportunities and help plan training and careers?
Yeah, so when you say that, let me ask the clarifying question. So you're talking about like people coming up as individuals on the
Yes.
skill side? Yeah. So on that, I think kind of one of the best uh quotes that I've heard recently was from Jansen, from the NVIDIA CEO.
Mm.
So I was at a conference out in San Francisco, and when he was talking about AI and kind of what the future was, it was kind of the one of the concerns is that AI is going to take everyone's jobs. And kind of his highlight was that the AI itself won't take your job. However, the person leveraging AI tools will, and the company using AI tools will. And when that was why I kind of got excited when you mentioned looking at educators and kind of where they should be.
Mm.
Um, I still coded everything manually, and most of my calculations for like thermodynamics and everything were still manual when I was in school, and I graduated in 2018. Um, it's kind of critical now. I mean, I couldn't do my current job even on the sales front without leveraging AI tools. From doing research on the clients that I work with, to even writing up whether it's proposals or other things, and having that the efficacy is pretty drastic. One of my coworkers, he's fantastic. He was doing some of the reports that I was doing through AI manually. It took him 3 hours, took me 30 minutes. And it's not a difference in skill at all. Honestly, he's probably better than I am. It was just the fact that I was leveraging those tools. So I think it's pretty critical when they start looking at the early side to kind of understand the theory behind it. So like, what do you want the outcome to be? And some level of understanding of kind of a sanity check of what the outcome should be. So
Mm.
that way, we leverage the tool, you can have some of those checks and balances. But from a like raw calculation side, you're not going to be doing triple integrals and derivations, I think, anytime soon, or at least it's not a value add activity.
Right. One of the concerns I think of more mature or older teachers who've been in the profession for quite some time is they build up these rules of thumb. And you mentioned, being able to just eyeball it and know that's looking like it's right. Yeah. Because you build up that knowledge over time, and in education, teachers do that between the curriculum and learning needs and those creative leaps that teachers can do in the moment, in the teaching moment. Do you think that using AI in school for younger teachers will be to their benefit or to their detriment or both?
So I think it's going to be a drastic benefit, because one of the things that I was noticing even when I was coming up in school was the lack of ability for personal attention. And it's just a teacher needs to be able to attend to a drastic amount of folks. So if they're able to automate some of the less value add processes, and maybe it's something like grading homework, they can spend more time actually going through the results of that with students. So I think their ability to have that one-on-one time should be drastically improved. The other component is, I think in some cases, we should rely less on some of those rules of thumb. I was just at a process safety conference up at Purdue, and Merck was doing a presentation on some of the components that were going into the drugs, the APIs. And one of the things that they look at when they're looking at shipping, cross country and stuff, is explosivity. And there was a rule of thumb from, I think, the 1980s from a Japanese PhD. And it wasn't bad. It had been adopted across the industries. Everyone kind of added their factor of safety. But they went back and they're like, well, we should test this. And it turned out that it was only on about 20 data points that they made. I think it was the Yoshida correlation. And everyone had been using that as the rule of thumb. And they went back and tested it on quite a few data points. I think they had borrowed data from Boehringer Ingelheim and a few other major organizations. And it turned out it was about as good as someone just drawing a line on a graph and just guessing.
Wow.
And it wasn't because the person was unintelligent. It was just they had used it on a few data points. It ended up coming through with a few other correlations later on, but
Right.
that rule of thumb wasn't accurate. So I think in engineering, sometimes we have to ask questions on our fundamental kind of assumptions there.
Yeah, that's really good. So for teachers who might be involved with older students or careers counselors or planning, what does the future of work look like? What are some areas of industry and the sectors that you work in where AI is making a real difference and students could think, I could head in that direction, pursue that as a career?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the manufacturing space, um, there's a lot of ideas on where it can impact. There's a handful of places where it's having real impacts now. So one of the bigger ones is around like predictive analytics. So you have a piece of equipment, you want to know when it's going to fail. There's been some traditional methods that are pretty decent, but it gives you a warning maybe, an hour before, a few minutes before, and you can start looking at days, weeks, months in advance, leveraging some of the AI technology. Um, the other component would be starting to look at like complex supply chains. So when you start stacking assumptions, so if you think of, I'm not sure what the Amazon equivalent would be for y'all, but out here, right? So you have your raw material suppliers, you have your manufacturer of whatever your good is, whether that is apparel or something else. You ship it to a middleman warehouse, maybe to a retail store, and then to a client. At each phase, you're stacking estimations of what it would be. So starting to turn that into a real-time result. So that way you can make calculated decisions on the business side of, hey, this is how much we should order, or even being able to trace goods. Great, there's an error on, especially you see it in drugs are the best at it right now, I think. But hey, there's an issue with Advil or ibuprofen. What should we recall? And being able to
Hmm.
narrow that down
Right.
to the smallest possible group so that you don't have situations like I think my first truck that I had was a Toyota, and that was back in I think it was 2003. I think they recalled all of the ball joints on it, and they couldn't figure out which trucks it was. So I think it was a handful of years, and every single vehicle in the Tacoma class got replaced ball joints. And it's because you couldn't narrow down, where it came from. So they couldn't say, hey, these ones are good. So I think there's some fun ways that you can start to get involved from kind of a business analytics side on manufacturing with kind of the artificial intelligence side, because it takes away the jobs that were kind of less engaging, where you were just dealing with a bunch of spreadsheets and trying to compile reports. Instead, the AI can do that kind of raw calculation for you, and then you can help make decisions and create insights around it. So I think it adds more value and it's more fun.
Hmm. I was running a workshop yesterday with some teachers that work at a polytechnic, um, similar language, I guess, right? Trade
Yeah,
training.
yeah.
Yep. Not a university, but does do degrees and things like that. And these teachers actually have high school students who don't enjoy the regular traditional high school. So they run a high school within this polytech. They do a fabulous, amazing job, really great outcomes for the students. And so what we were doing is using some data that was not theirs, just some model data, put it into Perplexity and asked
Yeah.
Perplexity to find some trends, identify what might be some causes for lack of achievement and then suggest some strategies that the teachers could put in place to improve achievement. And it did a fantastic job of bullet pointing all of this, pulling out the data, identifying the trends in a matter of seconds. Something that takes educators usually a long time, and particularly administrators. If you think of education and analytics and how data can be reviewed using AI, where do you see some of those opportunities in education across the board from K all the way up?
So I'm glad that you bring up the polytechnic side, because I think we've also hit a point recently. So one of my best friends lives up the street from me here in Colorado. He didn't get a college degree, and he is well into the six figures from an income standpoint. And he went to a technical college or like kind of a technical boot camp for coding.
Mm,
And I think there might be a trend and a value in that direction. Still, some of the kind of underrated top jobs in the US are things like I have friends in the railroad that are still managing yards, and quite a few of hands-on applications where there's a ton of opportunity. It just hasn't been promoted heavily in recent years. Inside the education space, especially with kids, I think the biggest opportunity is with engagement. So you run in, or at least I ran into a lot of issues when I was a kid. Me, my brother, my sister, we all skipped grades in the US education system. And then at one point, I think I needed to take a bus to go to the middle school when I was in elementary to take math classes, and then vice versa for high school, where AI and technology will allow an opportunity for students to be engaged and have it meet them where they're at. So if
that's
he
nice.
is excelling, then you can have a student sitting in the same classroom get challenged to excel further while you are still in the same environment, where at least I'm not sure what the education environment looks like for you guys, but in the US, it generally trends towards the mean. Try to help the bottom catch up. And it's not necessarily slow down the top, they just don't have the time. And so it ends up kind of bucketing kids off into honors or advanced placement, your normal classes, but it's still some pretty wide buckets. So I think
Mm,
having that tailored education where people can exceed in the areas that they're most kind of interested in or most talented will be a really cool opportunity. And it doesn't require as much of the kind of admin hand holding.
that's great. Hey, just as we wrap up, Eric, what are some final thoughts that you might have for the opportunities with AI for education? What would you encourage us with?
I think the main thing is to be curious. There is definitely caution to be held in what we are putting in front of, especially children. But be curious, and I think generally be optimistic. It's not going anywhere, and it's going to become more of a part of our lives. So I think the question is, how can we, in a measured way, create a better future for kids, leveraging this new tool, instead of kind of a fear of it and holding on to the old. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the book, but I think there's some really cool opportunities with what we have coming forward.
Great. Eric, thank you so much for your time. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Honestly, LinkedIn is a great spot. So that's probably the best, and it's just Erik, Erik Schulte, Schulte.
Awesome. You have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much.